What do you think is more dangerous? Turbulence, an engine failure, or smoke? For the 159 people on board South African Airways Flight 295, the answer came far too suddenly, with tragic consequences. On November 28, 1987, the Helderberg took off from Taipei, bound for Johannesburg. It carried passengers, cargo, and a secret. One that would remain hidden until it was far too late. But what exactly went wrong? What clues did investigators find? And why, decades later, are questions still unanswered? Today, we're unraveling the mystery of Flight 295, a disaster that still haunts aviation experts to this day. At 2:23 a.m., Flight 295 lifted off from Taipei with the silent confidence you'd expect from a Boeing 747, a plane built to be the queen of the skies, a fortress in the air. With Captain David Ice at the helm and a seasoned crew by his side, Helderberg's mission was simple: transport passengers and cargo safely across the Indian Ocean to Mauritius. On board, a mix of passengers were either heading home or traveling for business, while the crew followed standard protocols for a long-haul flight. But one part of the plane was a little different: the cargo hold. Along with standard luggage, it was packed with goods bound for South Africa. Some of this cargo was rumored to be mysterious, even unusual. Speculation suggests that it might have included flammable items, possibly even munitions. But we'll come back to that theory. For now, let's just say there was more to this flight than met the eye. Just over 3 hours into the flight, everything changed. In a calm yet urgent tone, Captain Ice contacted air traffic control with an unsettling report. Smoke was seeping from the cargo hold. For context, when a pilot reports smoke in a cargo hold at cruising altitude, it's essentially a nightmare scenario. Unlike smoke from something minor, like a burned-out cigarette, smoke in the cargo hold suggested something far more severe, potentially catastrophic. In aviation, where every second counts, smoke is a 4-alarm fire. Air traffic control directed Captain Ice to begin an emergency descent to prepare for an unscheduled landing in Mauritius. The situation was tense, but under control. At least that's what everyone thought. The crew started descending, following each step to reduce altitude in a controlled manner. Then, suddenly, communication was cut off. Silence. No more calls, no more responses. Air traffic control was left in an agonizing wait, unsure of what had just happened, or if there was even anyone left to respond. Meanwhile, on board the Helderberg, smoke filled not only the cargo hold, but crept into the cockpit and cabin, turning calm into chaos. Imagine the tension, the confusion, as thick smoke seeped into every corner. It wasn't just any smoke. It was dense, nearly unbreathable, the kind that blinds and chokes. As visibility decreased, the crew fought against overwhelming odds. Flight attendants likely tried to keep passengers calm, while the cockpit crew worked frantically to bring the situation under control. But how do you fight something you can't see? Something that could possibly explode at any second? Reports from similar incidents suggest smoke of this magnitude often signals that something catastrophic is in motion. It doesn't offer second chances. It chokes systems, confuses direction, and disables equipment with terrifying speed. Shortly after that last, chilling radio transmission, Flight 295 vanished from the radar. Hours later, search teams scoured the vast, empty waters of the Indian Ocean near Mauritius, hoping for any sign of the 747. Eventually, debris was found scattered across the waves, floating remnants of what was once the mighty Helderberg. As the grim recovery began, search crews realized that the aircraft had broken apart before hitting the water. Investigators quickly concluded that something disastrous had occurred on board, likely in the very cargo hold Captain Ice had reported filling with smoke. But the discovery only deepened the mystery. What could have caused such a brutal, in-air catastrophe? When investigators finally examined the remains of Flight 295, the pieces didn't exactly fall into place. The scattered wreckage told a tragic story, but it wasn't enough. The clues were scarce: burnt wiring, charred cargo sections, and parts of the fuselage that had survived the fire but showed signs of intense heat damage. Investigators could confirm a fire had broken out in the cargo hold, but not its source. To make things more frustrating, strict aviation regulations were already in place for transporting hazardous materials. So, how could something so combustible, so dangerous, make its way onto a commercial flight undetected? Was it an innocent mistake, or were there perhaps more secretive forces at play? Investigators couldn't ignore the possibility that the fire might have been started by undeclared hazardous materials. After all, when dealing with cargo, it's a delicate balancing act between the need for safety and the need to move goods efficiently. Unfortunately, in this case, something dangerous may have slipped through the cracks. If you're thinking, this sounds a bit too convenient, you're not alone. Theories began swirling almost immediately, fueled by the political climate at the time. Remember, we're talking about apartheid-era South Africa here, a country isolated by internal sanctions where secrecy was practically a government policy. Many speculated that this routine cargo was anything but routine. They claimed it included munitions or highly volatile chemicals, materials that would never have passed safety checks under normal circumstances. Some experts even suggest that the South African government might have used this flight to bypass embargoes, discreetly importing banned goods. It's a theory that, true or not, adds a sinister twist to the story. Just think about it. A mysterious cargo hold, a government with a history of secrecy, and a tragedy that defied straightforward explanation. It sounds like something out of a spy novel. Only this was real. To get to the bottom of the crash, South Africa established the Margot Commission. The commission worked tirelessly, combing through every piece of debris and analyzing every detail, ultimately concluding that a fire in the cargo hold led to the Helderberg's catastrophic end. However, despite the commission's exhaustive efforts, the final report failed to pinpoint the fire's exact cause. It simply remained unexplained. For the families of the victims, the lack of answers was beyond frustrating. And they weren't alone. Aviation experts and journalists criticized the commission's findings, calling them vague and incomplete. Was the commission withholding information, or were the answers simply too complex, buried in the ashes of the wreckage? Interestingly, many journalists pointed to the commission's reluctance to discuss the contents of the cargo hold. Could it be that political pressure or a reluctance to challenge government narratives influenced the gaps in the report? The official report may have closed the investigation, but it did little to silence the voices calling for more transparency. By the early 2000s, advances in technology made it possible to recover and analyze aircraft data in ways that were previously unimaginable. A renewed push for answers led to attempts to recover the cockpit voice recorder of Flight 295, which could have shed light on those final moments. Armed with advanced tech, investigators hoped to retrieve what the pilot and crew might have said or heard. But even this wasn't a magic bullet. The CVR's recording tape was partially damaged, leaving some of its information beyond reach, as if the mystery itself was determined to stay locked in the past. But what they did recover provided new depth to the fire hypothesis. It suggested a blaze that escalated beyond anyone's control, faster than the crew could respond. Still, the crucial details, the origin of the fire, the potential role of the cargo, remained just out of reach. It was a tragic reminder of how even the most advanced technology couldn't always solve the mysteries of the past. Flight 295 became a grim turning point in aviation. If a routine flight could end in disaster because of an uncontrolled fire, what did that mean for other flights carrying similar cargo? What if there were more Helderbergs out there, flying with the same vulnerabilities? To prevent another tragedy like this, the aviation industry introduced a wave of safety changes. New regulations were implemented for handling cargo, especially items with even a remote chance of being hazardous. Fire detection systems were upgraded to detect trouble faster, and suppression systems were enhanced to contain fires before they became unmanageable. Perhaps most crucially, mandatory training for crews was intensified, ensuring they were prepared to respond rapidly to fire emergencies. As we bring this story to a close, let's take a moment to remember the 159 lives lost in this disaster. They were people with hopes, dreams, and plans for the future, all of which ended on that tragic night over the Indian Ocean. The families of the victims fought tirelessly for answers, pushing for transparency, memorializing their loved ones and reminding the world of the human cost of aviation's darkest moments. To this day, memorials and remembrance ceremonies are held, honoring those lives and ensuring they aren't forgotten. And that's a wrap. So what do you think could have caused the fire? Do you believe the true cause might still be uncovered? Or are we left with more questions than answers? Drop your comments below. Before you go, don't forget to check out my recent video, Spanair 5022, the flight that crashed seconds after takeoff. Keep flying high with us, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and be ready for more stories that defy the skies.